as we continue with a novena to Our Lady of Mount Carmel, I want to interpret the sacred scriptures for this morning in light of what Our Lady of Mount Carmel represents, the charism of the Carmelites. In the first reading, we hear from the prophet Hosea, who among the prophets is considered the prophet of divine love, the herald of divine love. And he speaks about Israel as a luxuriant vine. And this very much is an expression of Carmel. Carmel in Hebrew is 𝐶𝑎𝑟𝑚𝑒𝑙, which, like most ancient languages, is multivalent. There's many layers to the meaning of the name. Carmel can mean, first and foremost, the best translation possible is garden of God, but it also means luxuriant vine, or lush forest, or orchard. And that is an analogy of what she spiritually represents as the luxuriant vine of God's love. That she was the most endowed with the gifts of God's grace, full of grace. And as a result, she in her humanity, because she isn't a divine person, she's a human being through and through, but in her humanity, from the moment of her conception, God endowed her with every grace he could possibly give in light of the foreseen merits of what Jesus would accomplish in his incarnation, cross, and resurrection. In light of that, the Father endowed her with every spiritual blessing in the heavens, as St. Paul says in the first chapter to the Ephesians, that Jesus obtained for us by his paschal mystery. And so we are all destined to be deified, to be luxuriant in the life of God, to the fullness of grace in heaven, to share in the divine life of the Lord himself, deification. That is our destiny through the merits of who Jesus is and what he accomplished. And Mary shared in those first fruits on earth more than any other human being. So she is this luxuriant vine. However, the context Hosea is using it, representing Israel in this way, is that as a result of their earthly prosperity, their being endowed with the fruits of the earth and everything going well for them, the more they prospered in earthly terms, the more their hearts were prone to stray from faithfulness to the Lord, from loyalty to God alone. And as a result, their hearts, their desires began to be consumed by earthly attachments and pleasures and power seeking and self-centeredness of all types, which led to idolatry in every form and the breaking of God's commandments, choosing false gods to give allegiance of their lives' desires to something apart from God, something in creation, as the fulfillment of their happiness. And as a result of this falsehood, the Lord sent forth purifications in order to bring their hearts back to him. And so this prophet says, break up for yourselves a new field, for it is time to seek the Lord. Sow for yourselves justice, and you will reap the fruit of piety. In other words, prioritize doing what is right and true in God's eyes. And if you sow that seed of righteousness, you will reap the fruit of reverence, true worship of God. And that is the most important act of justice of all, to give God his due. That's the number one principle, the number one highest priority of justice is divine worship, to give God what we owe to him as our creator. And so reverence is a true worship. As Jesus says to the Samaritan woman, the Father desires such worshipers as these, those who will worship him in spirit and truth. And in the psalm, we hear, seek always the face of the Lord. And this is another important component of Carmelite spirituality, is to seek the face of God. Living in his presence on a daily basis. To seek God's face means to be enamored and captivated by his beauty, and the beauty of his love being of the greatest priority to our desires. To seek the face of the Lord, especially in Jesus, the fullness of the image of God, as the first chapter of Hebrews says so well. He is the radiance of his being. And then in the gospel we hear about Jesus choosing 12 apostles by name to a vocation of love, a mission of mercy. And part of this mission of mercy was the reality of casting out evil in order for light, God's light of truth, to prevail. So he gave them authority over unclean spirits to drive them out and to heal. In the rule of the Carmelites that we received from the Patriarch of Jerusalem, St. Albert, there's two components to the rule of St. Albert that we Carmelites follow that are the most prominent. It's the shortest of all the rules of religious life and monastic life in the church. And it's a succinct synopsis of desert spirituality, the spirituality of the desert fathers. The two prominent themes, the first is silence, spiritual silence, especially interior, by which we can seek the face of God and live in the holiness of his presence. The second theme is spiritual warfare. The reality that in seeking holiness will inevitably involve battles with the world of flesh and the devil. To be aware of that and to begin to grow in what it means to be clothed in God's armor and to have a discernment of spirits and to what it means to enact the authority of Jesus in order that we may live in his righteousness and that our fidelity may not be compromised. As we celebrate this Eucharist, we acknowledge the proclamation that Jesus gave to his apostles. The kingdom of heaven is at hand. The Carmelite saints are ambassadors of this gospel, the reality that the kingdom of heaven is at hand. And the emphasis of the saints of Carmel is the kingdom of heaven is within. It's not simply at hand, at our disposal, at arm's length, reachable, tangible, sacramentally, but mystically, the kingdom of heaven is in our hearts. It is within ourselves, and that's where we seek God's face, in the depths of our heart of hearts, his Holy of Holies. And we receive Holy Communion, the divine presence of the Holy Trinity, through the Paschal mystery of Jesus, our beloved Lord. We receive the Holy Eucharist in order to deepen this interior life of mystical union with God. And it is at the Mass par excellence that we receive a foretaste of heaven. God who is luxuriant in his glory and who desires to endow us with his divine life.